Hello and welcome. Today we are making a simple weeknight chili cornbread casserole. Now, normally the chili part would take an hour or more, so we're just going to use pre-made for that and take care of the cornbread on our part. This means that you also know you're going to like it, since you can just use any chili that you already know you like as a base for this, and that's always a nice bonus when going into a new recipe. So let's look at what we're going to need for this. For this, you're going to need two 15-ounce cans of pre-made chili, or about 30 ounces of any chili that you happen to like. An eighth of a cup of butter, that's probably going to be a little under 2 tablespoons. If you can't get a hold of an eighth cup, I'll have a link to a measuring cup set below that actually does that if you need it. A half a cup of milk or non-dairy alternative, 1 egg, 3/4 of a cup yellow, white, or blue cornmeal, a half cup all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup sugar, 1/2 tablespoon baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon salt. To start with, you will want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. I also like to stick a sheet pan in there with a parchment or a silk pad, as you can see here. This is to make sure if the casserole is to overflow or some of the chili is pushed out by the boiling and the expansion of the cornbread, that it gets caught on the sheet pan and not on the oven's burners, which are not as easy to clean. I tend to do this with all sorts of casseroles and anything sort of wet that you put in an oven for just that same reason. Okay, for our cornbread, it's going to be 99.9% super simple. The 0.01% is that we need to soften or melt the butter first. Once you have done that, we can mix everything in whatever order we want, but I do liquids just kind of sort of towards the beginning. And the reason I do that is just to make sure that the egg is fully mixed in, because I have run into egg bits in baked goods before, and you get a little piece of scrambled egg in there and it kind of ruins it no matter what you're doing. So you do want to make sure that part's mixed up, but otherwise we're not worried about clumps here, so any order past that really does work. Clumps in here, at least small size clumps, will make pieces of the cornbread, the chunks as it's falling apart, larger. So the bigger your clumps, to a certain extent, of course, the larger those clumps will be. If you're like me, I want mine to be very well mixed in here, then you want very little clumps. And either way, you can just mix this until it's nice and smooth, like I'm doing here, or just a little short of that for bigger clumps. As always, thank you all for watching and liking and sharing the videos. It's making the channel grow at an ever-increasing rate, and me and the kittens appreciate it. It means the world to us, and if you are not already subscribed, subscribe for more fun food videos like this and a dash of cat pictures for good measure. So, once we have our cornbread batter, we are ready for construction. In the spirit of easy weeknight meals, this is as simple as it could get. We just pour our chili into an 8 or 9 inch pan. I'm using a 9 inch, so mine's going to be a little bit thinner height-wise than it would be if you used an 8 inch pan. As well as thinner on the 9 inch pan, the cornbread will also not quite reach the outer edge of the pan, so you're going to have about a 1/2 inch to a 1 inch gap between the cornbread and the pan itself. Once that is in your pan and everything, just spread out your cornbread batter gently into the pan and as evenly as possible. This is going to help with both cooking time and the rising of the cornbread. Once it's all poured in, we want to make sure that, again, it is mostly even before it goes in the oven, so that way you can get it all cooked at about the same time, and you don't have really dry parts and parts that aren't quite cooked yet. Oh yes. One thing to note, I tend to leave the corners uncovered, even if it does get to the outer edge of the pan, and the reason for that is it gives a place for excess pressure from the boiling of the chili to go, and tends to be able to leave the casserole's underside without taking a significant chunk of your top with it. And off to the oven we go for 20 to 30 minutes. Usually 25-ish minutes is right. So, while that bakes, let's talk about the recipe a little bit. On the chili side, it will work with nearly any chili. You only need to avoid chilies that are a bit too wet. If they are pretty thin and runny, it's not going to work at all. Too dry just means you need to add a touch of water, but too wet, you can't remove that water, so it's going to stay watery no matter what. This will less puff up in the oven and more rise downwards into the chili most of the time, especially if you're using a 9 inch pan. It's going to give you areas where the beans are also get baked into the bottom of the cornbread as it sort of wraps around them. And this actually ends up with a really good flavor on the cornbread and makes it mix perfectly. Sadly, a camera issue means I only have about 5 minutes of cooking footage, so sadly no cool time-lapse footage in the oven like I like to do. Once a toothpick comes out dry from your cornbread, you are ready to go. Since the chili is pre-cooked, we don't have to worry about it being ready because it's already ready when we open the can. And with that, we have made a super easy and tasty weeknight meal that can be put together and on the table in less than 45 minutes. Only about 10 of those, though, are hands-on time, so it actually works out pretty well no matter how busy you tend to be. As noted earlier, since you will be just using your pre-made preferred chili, you also know you're going to end up liking it even the first time you make it, so no risk. That is always a nice bonus. And with that, as always, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day and a great meal.